Hey everybody, welcome to Fixed on Jesus. This is the podcast that we have at CenterChurch for people at CenterChurch, actually recorded here at the CenterChurch building. My name is Rich, and I am joined by Mark Johnson Jr.
Hello, Rich.
Good to see you again, Mark.
Good to see you too. You just gave up our location, though.
I did. I'm not afraid, though.
All right.
We're not going to live in fear.
Even with one of the doors broken?
It's not broken now.
Okay,
It's
good.
fixed, yeah. And behind the camera, we have Heather Corbett. There's Heather and her fancy dance hands, or what was that in Napoleon?
It's a hand model.
Jazz hands. That's right.
Yeah.
Were you in the Jazz Hands Club?
She's a hand model.
You were? Because you've lived up in the Northwest where I don't like an. Anyway, never mind. If you're joining us here, you're in part two of an interview we're having right now with Adela.
Welcome back, Adela.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed.
Yeah.
If you haven't got a chance to listen to the first part, you can check on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and many other places. And there will be multiple parts in the future as well.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in.
Amen. Or that's right. Amen. Anyway.
Amen.
Whatever. So we are where we left off. We're telling the story, and one of the things we want to talk about now is why it was hard for people to see that this was an abusive marriage, right?
Yeah.
And one of the interviews or one of the definitions we've found helpful as we've talked about abuse is one by Darby Strickland, because abuse is a buzzword. There are people who throw around the word abuse, right?
Yeah.
Or they talk about church hurt, and really what they're hurt about is some people just want to live in their sin, right? And they don't want to be confronted by the word of God and
In love.
yeah, right, in love. But that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Abuse is defined as a pattern of coercive, controlling, and punishing behaviors used by one person, often in a marriage, to dominate and oppress another, typically in pursuit of their own self-interest and entitlement. And would you say that would be how it worked out?
Yeah, that's what I lived through, yeah.
Yeah.
That was also just right on par with what we learned in part one, where we talked about controlling behavior, anger, and obsessive pornography use. The pornography use is self-interest, it's pride, it's lust, it's all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So now throughout this whole time that you guys are married, you're going to church.
Absolutely.
And
Every Sunday.
yeah, so
And often Wednesday, and yeah.
right. So you are faithful churchgoers.
Absolutely.
You go to small group. I mean, you're involved. You're serving. The kids are coming. I mean, and it's not like you were Christmas and Easter churchgoers, right?
Not at all. We were very involved.
And nobody saw, right?
That's right.
Why do you think nobody saw?
That's such a complicated question. I think, it's hidden abuse for more than one reason. One major one is that my ex-husband did not want anyone to see. And so he acted completely differently when he was with people.
So he's a different person when he's around other people versus just you.
Absolutely, a different person. I remember coming to one small group when we went here, and we were talking about, the small group leader was talking about humility and said, who I see is really humble, and he said my ex-husband, and I'm sitting there dying because he's like the most prideful person I know.
You're like throwing up in your mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what are you supposed to do at that point? Raise your hand and say, no, he's not.
I object,
but you can't. Right. You can't. So he put on a great face for other people. He would ask to pray for people. Would he
ask to pray for you at home?
No.
Did he just pray for you at home? Like, did he?
I mean, maybe once in a while he might ask to pray for me or pray for me at home. He would go through seasons of trying to be the godly husband. Let's do devotions together or whatever. So he definitely had ups and downs in trying to do that, but it was all about the same thing, which is trying to look good, even to himself. Sometimes he was trying to look good to himself as well. But No, like I remember a lady here was diagnosed with cancer, and he was listening to her for a long time, and I just looking over at that and thinking, I would just love him to listen to me about anything, like
Yeah.
he wouldn't listen to me about my problems or then want to pray for me, and so he put on great appearances in front of others. I was also really embarrassed about the abuse, extremely embarrassed about pornography, and didn't want that stigma even on myself, So I didn't want that to come out. And he certainly didn't want any of it to come out, so he made it, and he didn't want me to share with others. Like when I started sharing more with Trey and Charlotte about some things near the end, he says, you need to stop telling Trey and Charlotte everything, and he says, what would you like if I went and told Charlotte stuff you did? And I said, please do. Like, it would bring out the truth, because I was finally to that point where you're trying to bring out the truth. And you're like, yeah, I think that would be very clarifying if you would go do that. But he didn't want those things to come out. So he loved the appearance of righteousness, and he played it well. Like nobody knew really. Yeah.
And behind closed doors, there's things there are things happening, like one time you had a miscarriage. Maybe tell that story.
Yeah, so that was horrific, and in hindsight it even gets more horrific as I look back on what I went through, but we were deep in abuse by then, so I didn't really even realize how horrific it was. But I had a miscarriage, and as I started bleeding, I'm devastated, and there's a football game going on though, and so my husband wants to be watching the football game, and I begged him. I'm like, could you help me? I'm having a miscarriage. The baby's dying. And his take on that was, the baby will die whether I watch the football or not, so I'm going to go ahead and continue watching the football. Mm-hmm. And so
you're alone in the bathroom by yourself with your husband watching football.
Yeah.
As you lose
and there's like no compassion. I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry you're losing the baby. There wasn't any of that. Like, so that's emotional abuse. Like, that's neglect. It's serious. Like, so I reached out to, frankly, a high school friend who I've known through the years, but didn't get together with regularly. I was crying so hard. She couldn't figure out who I was for a while, because I just needed somebody to be with me in that miscarriage. So that's neglect. And then I ended up having to have emergency surgery because they thought I was going to die. Things were going wrong with the miscarriage, and they thought I was going to die. And when we came home from the emergency surgery, he did come to the emergency surgery and stuff, but when we came home from it, there was medication that I needed, and he didn't want to go get the medication because he was tired. And I had to beg him and say, could you please get the medication? I'm going to need it. And then I found out later he probably, when he went and got medication that night, got into pornography. So, like, it's just all tied up, and I wasn't cared for. And I was in mourning after the miscarriage, and there was no mutual grieving.
It wasn't like you were carrying this together.
Yeah, we didn't carry any of this together. I heard, a friend of mine heard I had a miscarriage, and her husband cried. And she told me about that. She says, oh, yeah, we just sat and prayed for you and cried. And to hear that somebody else's husband was crying, and my husband obviously didn't even care, it was just devastating. Yeah.
Now, and of course that's behind closed doors. Nobody knows at the time. You're not showing up to church with black eyes and saying, I fell, right? Because from one of the things, as we've talked about over the years, when abuse comes up, at least maybe historically, maybe a little different now, but in the past it was, what was he hitting you?
Yeah.
And that was the definition of abuse, the functional definition of abuse, right?
Yeah.
Have you been asked that many times?
Way too many times. And to tell you the honest truth, I used to, in my mind, I wished that he would hit me. It was to that point of wanting that validation that this was abuse that I would literally I wish he would just hit me and make it clear, because it was too confusing.
Yeah.
Because not everybody, but a lot of people go there, and they don't realize that emotional abuse is extreme abuse. It got me to the point that I ended up having to be hospitalized for a week in a mental hospital because I desperately didn't want to live anymore. I wanted to commit suicide, but as a follower of Christ, I didn't want to do that, so I was willing to get help and go get help. But that, even though I didn't have physical bruises, it was affecting my body. All that stress.
Because emotional abuse is not a catch-all, nor is it something that is like a phrase that you can throw around that doesn't really mean anything, right?
Yeah.
That's what we've seen, right?
Yeah.
And also the definition of abuse, spousal abuse, is that if one of the spouses is in fear of being hurt, that's abuse.
Yeah.
So punching the walls and making threatening motions toward you and screaming at you and that kind of thing, as the pattern of your marriage.
Yeah. Well, even legally, domestic abuse can involve, if they are breaking your things, that's illegal.
As a matter of intimidation.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, not as dropping things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so as you go to church, he's praying for people, he's putting on a show, I would say. Absolutely. And you're dying inside. How did you begin to get help?
I mean, I tried from the beginning to get help in many ways. But I also hid it. So, it wasn't easy for people because I didn't even understand it. So, it's just so complicated that way. I didn't have the understanding, the education to understand what was happening. So I couldn't go in and say, hey, I'm being abused, because that word didn't even register in my head.
Yeah.
I think you'll remember when finally he was removed from the house. I said, I didn't know I was being abused. To that end. So 23 years in, right. I didn't know I was being abused, even though it's so obvious now. So what was your question? How did it start coming
to get
up?
help? Yeah.
Well, I think the mental breakdown really helped.
Those aren't words you hear in the same sentence very often.
Yeah. But it really did help me in many ways. So
talk about that week. I mean, we need to unpack that.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to say what, you were contemplating self-harm, correct?
Yes.
And this is a long time ago, so it's hard for me to remember all the details.
Yeah.
You weren't, just for clarity, when we're talking about going to church, you weren't going to our church that whole time. But this time you're going to our church.
Right. Yes.
And so we recommended that you go into you check yourself into a behavioral health place, right?
Yeah. Well, you were on vacation. So
I was?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That wasn't helpful, but
when you went for help, you went to the church first.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Well, at that point,
maybe not rich, but
at that point, I was getting. I think my small group leaders at the time were starting to see something's off here. Maybe it's abuse, or they also were thinking at that time that maybe there was something wrong with me mentally, and they were saying, your poor husband is having to deal with this. They weren't saying this to me, but there was that thought in their mind. But they knew that something was majorly wrong and I needed help. And so I was pretty good about I called the suicide hotline more than once, and that night I called the suicide hotline, and this just shows the abuse too. So when I had also tried to call my small group leader, and they hadn't answered, because the middle of the night is when a lot of these things happen, and it's really hard to get help in the middle of the night. And so that's just one aspect of this whole thing. So when I was on the line with the suicide hotline, this friend called me back. And so I really just wanted to talk to them. So I told them, the suicide hotline, okay, I'm okay now. I'm going to talk to my friend. I'm not just hanging up on you. But I guess if you call the suicide hotline and then hang up, they have an obligation to try to make sure you're okay. So my phone was connected to my parents' phone, and only the week before, because things had started, I had only told them anything about me not doing well with depression the week before, so it was brand new to them, though I'm sure they'd seen it over the years. But the police ended up not being able to get a hold of me, and so the address that was connected was my parents' address. So at 1 a.m, they jumped over my parents' fence and were knocking on the door. Well, so my parents were calling everybody in my house, trying to figure out what was going on, and that made my ex-husband so angry. Not because, let me see, my wife is calling the suicide hotline and she's really sick. That didn't cross his mind that was a problem. It was because of the appearance of, now her parents are involved and what's going on, and let's cover this up. So I was able to take a step back to deal with my husband being upset, take a step back from being suicidal, help him get back to sleep so that I could continue on with my evening. Not because he didn't care that I was being suicidal. He just cared that my parents were involved. So the next day, friends from church came over and took me to the hospital. I willingly...
Mental hospital.
Yeah, mental hospital. I willingly went. I did call my husband and told him that I was going, and he was angry that I was going. He's like, well, I'm having a really hard day at work, and maybe I should go too. And I says, well, you could. That's an option for you, but I'm going. So, there was no support that he was worried that I'm sick. It was just all appearances. So, fortunately, I was admitted, and it was one of the best weeks of my life, which is horrific to say, because it was the first time I had release from the abuse. I could sleep. Nobody was yelling at me. Jesus was so present there. It was beautiful. And I sat there waiting to be admitted, and they didn't have a bed for me. And I'm in what they call chair purgatory for 3 days, I think. And I sat there and said, I love it here. And Jesus was present, because he's present in those deep moments. But also, I wasn't being abused. So it just speaks so strongly to how abused I was, that just a mental relief of being away from it was great. So at that time, I had worked so hard to hide everything in my life, and they take everything away from you. They take your phone away, they take your clothes away, they take everything away, and you're with all these other people that are having mental crises, and you don't ask people what they do for a living. You say, why are you here? And so it was just really interesting at that point to allow myself to say why I was there. No, still at that point I didn't realize I was being abused, so I may have not told them the right answers. I thought I had some mental issues going on. But it still was so freeing to be open and not have to hide. And so I think that was a turning point for me, because I started not hiding. And these people that were trying to help me, the small group leaders, they started being more and more concerned. And I started sharing more stories. There was a...
Just one quick
Yeah.
thought. You're in the behavioral health center for a week, right?
Yeah.
How many times did your ex-husband come and visit you?
He actually visited almost every night because, do you know why? The appearance of righteousness was really important to him. And so everybody expected him to visit.
So he did.
So he would come with a Bible in hand, because that's also what a godly husband would do. And he would read to me from the Bible. And then he told me I could never come back there because it was too expensive. And so, like, after he told me that, I said, you need to stop now. And I asked him to leave, which is pretty bold for me at that time in my life, to ask him to leave. And I had a mental breakdown in the mental hospital, which is a great place to have a mental breakdown,
Yeah.
I've got to say. If you got to have one, that's the
I
great
don't
place
mean to
to have
laugh,
it.
but
right.
the
You
way
know?
you said it.
No, it's true.
No, it's true. And so, and not once after I got out of the mental hospital did I ever hear from him, I'm so glad you didn't kill yourself. I'm so glad you're alive. I heard exactly how much it cost and that I couldn't go back.
What did he refer to it as?
He referred to it as a vacation to the mental hospital.
A
And he-
vacation to the mental
Yeah,
hospital.
because apparently it was the worst week of his life, which I believe is because, first of all, the facade of our life is falling apart. People are seeing things they shouldn't see. And also now he's having to care for the whole household. And I'm not caring for it. And he's having to figure out things that are happening that week. And I'm not doing them.
Yeah.
So, like, I never did allow him to tell me why it was the worst week of his life, which I'm okay with.
Yeah.
So, just for reference,
Yeah.
24 years of marriage, approximately where in that timeline was this
Yeah,
event?
so this is, I was married in 1995, and I had the breakdown in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah,
So over 20 years.
yeah.
So it's nearing, we know this now, it was
Yeah.
nearing the end.
It was nearing the end. Yeah.
But at the time, you might not have.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
It was going to be at the end. So somewhere around that time, so I started sharing more. There was at one point around that time that he says, you need to not tell our small group leaders anymore. And I was able to say, I will start telling, and I'm not going to do that. But, like, it took me 20 years to get to that point.
Because he wanted all his stuff hidden.
Yeah. And so I was able to stand up to him and say that. But there was a second incident with a knife at that point. He got really angry about something. I don't even know what. And he was trying to open something with a knife, which was a really dumb thing to do anyway, but he was opening some plastic thing with a knife, but we happened to be talking at the same time. So when he got angry at me, he started slamming the knife into the counter or whatever it was on. I'm just inches away. So obviously at that point you realize, like, your body realizes it even if you don't, is that the next stab could be me, right? Like, so it was really horrific, and I left, and I did tell people about that. And so, like, now that's helpful that I'm saying things that maybe people listen to more. I don't know. That's the part of the thing that's so confusing, you know?
Or maybe some of the people that you're talking to are starting to add those little
Yeah,
snippets together,
absolutely,
kind of getting a
absolutely.
bigger picture. Maybe not nearly the entire picture, but like you said earlier, those events in isolation might not be a red flag.
Right.
But 10 or 15 of them, and now one with a knife.
And now you're saying,
Yeah.
you keep saying it, and you've had a mental breakdown, and
Right.
your husband didn't show up to help you go to the hospital. Like, it starts adding together. And so she said, you need to tell someone this, or I need to tell someone this, but, like, we need to. So it started It started, so it's probably 2017 by now, but I realized, like, I think I'm being abused. I finally, without saying, I don't know, it's confusing in there. I think I'm being abused. I guess I said that in retrospect, that I hadn't known until recently. So we were in marriage counseling at the time, with someone outside the church, and he didn't want to go that day. I mean, it was around this time. He didn't want to go one day, and I says, well, I'm going whether you go or not. I'm going to go. And that made him really mad. And I says, and I'm not going to be late, so since you're not ready, I'm going to leave now. Which, this was just boldness that I wouldn't have done in the past. So I left, and he decided to come, probably because he doesn't want me being there alone. But I had about 10 minutes to tell them, hey, I think I'm being abused. And unfortunately, I mean, I think this couple is great marriage counselors for basic marriage problems. I think they had some really great skills, but they didn't know how to recognize abuse. And they had a rule that you couldn't talk about things that were happening about the other person when you were alone. So, which is a horrible rule.
For abused people, right?
Yeah, it's a horrible rule for abused people.
So but like in a normal marriage, you want to talk in front of counselors.
Both sides.
Right,
Yeah,
but
right.
how can you find out there's abuse if you never allow the talk? Because it's dangerous to talk in front of the other person.
Why?
Because they're going to be angry when you get home. The counselors aren't going to go home with you.
Yeah. So you're not protected.
So you're not protected, and it's going to be angry. And how can you, as a woman, even figure out you're being abused if you don't tell some of these stories?
Yeah, right.
So, but I told them, I used the word abuse that day. That's probably the first day, I really used the word abuse. And I said, okay, because it was a rule, he's about to come. I'm willing to bring it up today. And for some reason, I don't know, they didn't bring it up. And so I had just shared my heart that I think I'm being abused. They did. I happened to have had surgery on my wrist, and so I had a bruise. So they did say, well, is that bruise from that? So and that was well-meaning, but that also feeds into, unless you've got a bruise, it's not abuse, And so then I told them that I was gonna make an appointment with you guys and share about abuse. And they wrote back to me and were like, are you going to just blindside your husband by doing this? And so again, I'm actually, and I'm not blaming them, they just made some mistakes because they had one specialty, which was regular marriage counseling, and they couldn't recognize abuse. They weren't at that time recognizing abuse, and they didn't know how dangerous some of this regular marriage counseling was for someone in abuse.
Yeah.
So, so I ended up calling Trey and saying, hey, we've got this meeting set up. Is it okay if I'm coming alone, or do I need to bring my husband? And praise God, he said, it's okay either way, And so that was a blessing. So I came into, and you were there, I wrote out pages and highlighted some things that had happened, including one time where he put his hands around my neck. He didn't put his hands around my neck strongly, though. He was just trying to show, I feel like strangling you. So, he didn't, there was a looseness about it. So I could justify in my head, well, he wasn't really trying to hurt me, but it still was horrific and horrifying, There was a time right around that time that he was so angry that he was hitting the headboard above my head over and over while I was trying to sleep. And then he would come in he didn't go to sleep that night, but he would come in every 2 hours and wake me up and scream at me. And at that point, I was just in frozen mode. I would just try to get away from him. I wasn't trying to make him angry. So every 2 hours, just angry that I was sleeping and he was awake and he was mad. So I told you some of those things, and either that meeting or the next, I'm not sure, I said that I had slept in my clothes that night, and somebody looked over at me, one of the men there, and said, "You slept in your clothes?"
Why? Yeah.
Why? Like, that was a big red flag. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I do that regularly. Like, I always slept in my clothes at that point but I didn't really realize that was weird. Like,
Why did you do it, though?
I did it so that if he got angry in the middle of the night, which is the worst time, I could get out of the room quickly. Mainly to avoid emotional abuse, but also to get out if I needed to, if it got worse, because the trajectory of emotional abuse eventually does lead to physical abuse.
Yeah, it does.
So,
Well, and it's a question like that I think comes up on a regular basis, or we dealt with as people would interact with you. His anger was so dominating, so difficult, so life dominating, and your responses weren't always quiet, mousy kind of things, right? You responded back, and you would say from time to time you responded back sinfully, right?
absolutely, yeah.
And so now, what's the difference between a sinful response and being equally responsible and say this is this is like a two-way road?
Yeah, and it's just so devastating to be in an abusive marriage and have people saying things like that. Like, I heard it takes two to tango, and actually that's not correct. Like, one person can be doing an amazing dance and the other person isn't, and it's not the person's fault that the dance isn't going amazing. But you're right, like, I sinned in my marriage because every single person who's married sins in their marriage.
Right.
And I don't think if there was a woman that's attacked, on the road running, and they fight back, nobody says, well, you kind of were to blame too because you fought back. And nobody says that, but you hear it all the time. When you fight back emotionally, people blame you.
So it was a matter of survival.
Yeah, it's a matter of survival. Yeah, there's sin involved at times, for sure.
Yeah. Because
we're all sinners. Right. And one of my counselors said, she tried to explain it to me because I also was confused by it, because it was really confusing whether, and my husband would tell me I was also to blame. So, there's so much psychological abuse going on that he's saying, well, you're to blame too. All the time he's saying this, and we're bad parents. He wouldn't say he's a bad parent. He would say we're bad parents. And so he is putting you down all the time and saying you're to blame. And so I was struggling with, well, aren't I partly to blame for this, And she said, no, she had a analogy that said it's like seeing one bear attacking another. When the smaller bear fights back, it's not starting a mutual fight. It's trying to survive. It's using whatever tools it can to protect itself. Who had more power? Who was the one that had fear and who didn't? And I think it is just very different. I was responding to what was happening to me, I think would be the difference.
Yeah. Well, and that didn't mean that you were equally to blame.
Not at all.
Even if that response was loud and yelling or whatever, right?
I lost my voice screaming at him one time.
Yeah.
So that is confusing to people. Well, then aren't you equally to blame? Right. But no, you're trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So you can separate blame and sin. So Adela's ex-spouse can sin against her and abuse her, and she can respond on occasion or even often in sin. It doesn't mean that she's to blame for the abuse.
Correct.
Is that what we're saying?
Well, or that she's not the abuse she's received, but she's not being abusive to her husband.
Right. She's just responding sinfully.
She's responding sinfully, right? And so, that's hard. So, I'll put my hat on in this story.
Yeah.
As a counselor and as a pastor trying to navigate these things, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Because we're not living in the home. We're not we're not privy to a lot of these conversations. But you begin to see some of the signs, the mental hospital, and then when, I think this is fair to say, Adela, when you started opening up, the floodgates opened, and it was clear this was not just occasions of anger, but patterns of control and anger that were life dominating. And so that was, and the reality is, it's hard to know what to do as a pastor.
Or a counselor.
Yeah, it's hard to know what to do. And so maybe I'll tell this part of the story.
Okay.
You ask me questions.
All right.
I don't know. But at some point, as it became clear after the behavioral health visit, and we realized, okay, this is one of the mistakes pastors can make in abusive situations. They can do counseling together with a couple. You need to separate them, even if you have any kind of suspicion that there's abuse going on. You can't do couples counseling. You have to separate
Every time.
You have to separate to get the real story.
Yeah.
Because there will be, and I saw this because we experienced this in the beginning when we're trying to help, right? Mm-hmm. You would say one thing with your ex-husband in the room, but later it was different. Not because you were trying to hide, but you were trying to protect yourself, right?
I don't remember that, but you tell me, and maybe.
Well, yeah. But you could imagine in a world you did that. You could not say something different like you're lying, but shade the truth and put him in a better light in a way that you wouldn't do it if he wasn't in the room.
I could see a lot of women doing that. I don't know if that happened in our case as much, because I really don't want to lie, but I did think the best of him, and I didn't want to lie the opposite direction either. Right. I did not want to accuse him of things he hadn't done, or paint him out to be this horrific person, even though in many ways that's what he was, but I was looking for all the good in him too. I didn't want to do that.
So did you send him cards? Did you speak well of him? Did you
whenever I could. I don't think I didn't post on Facebook or anything like he's amazing, but I would say things I could that were positive. Uh-huh. So I definitely, with pictures and everything, made it look like everything was okay.
And why were you doing that?
Because, first of all, that's what everybody does.
Yeah, right.
So wait, Rich just clarified this before. So everything we see on social media isn't always the truth.
I
know that's a shocker. Anyway.
Secondly, I'm trying to. I am trying to honor my husband. Mm-hmm. I am also trying. It's so complicated. I don't want the shame of being in an abusive marriage either. There is a hidden part of it in so many different ways. It's just really complicated. Right?
So it's partly speaking something into being. You're speaking to what you want. You're speaking to what you can celebrate, right?
Yeah.
Because you can imagine a wife saying positive things because she wants peace in the home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in part, you were doing some of that, not lying, but just trying to seize onto the positive, right?
Just see the best of it. Just frame it in a way where you're honoring him. You. It sounds like you were being really careful about gossiping.
Absolutely.
Or slandering him.
Yes.
You're married to him, so you know that even slandering him affects you, or even just affects how life goes at home.
And frankly, I was fully ready to fully reconcile with him. So first of all, certain people that you don't tell because you hope that there'll be reconciliation and you don't want them to think differently of them, and you don't want to ruin their relationship, Secondly, I was starved for his attention and affection, and if he gave any of it, I had this hope in my brain, maybe it's over now. Maybe everything's going to be okay now. I mean, he also lost, when we were married, 3 jobs due to pornography. So but every time you're just trying to survive, and I was ready to forgive, and move forward with him. And I was forgiving regularly, but if there was a glimmer of hope that he might change, I was on board.
So what would you say to people who say, well, why didn't you say anything earlier?
Yeah. That breaks my heart because, first of all, you are asking somebody who mentally can't even understand life at this point to act like somebody that's not being abused. Okay, me now, I'm not being abused at all. I could speak up if somebody started abusing me. I have enough knowledge to recognize abuse. I have found my voice. I think you would. You would believe that.
You found your voice and some, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great.
So
it echoes now for sure.
Yeah, turn my headphones down a little.
But that time, I didn't have the mental capacity. When you don't even know it's abuse because I haven't hit you, your brain is saying, would you please hit me so this is clear? You're trying to run the house, have the full mental load. You're watching your children watch abuse, and you don't want them thinking this is what Christianity is. So, there's just so much going on. And you do tell people little things, but they realize that it's just normal. They think that it's just normal marital things. That's way too complicated,
Yeah.
The daily amount that you're trying to survive and get through that day, how are you supposed to go and tell when you're also not a gossip?
Right. It's hard to know how to navigate that, isn't it?
It's really hard to navigate.
All right, why don't we stop here? The next part of the story, we're going to talk about the day that the
Day of reckoning.
The day pastoral team asked him to leave.
Yeah.
And then some of the physical effects and some of the effects you've dealt with since then. And we've been talking a lot about negative stuff. I want to talk about what the Lord's done. I mean, the locusts have come in and devoured, but the Lord has redeemed, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it would also be helpful to hear about, you spoke really graciously of those counselors that maybe were just out of their depth in that, and maybe just hearing some more about how this church cared for you. I wasn't here at this time, so I don't know how it went. He was up close. It probably would be better to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, if you have questions, if you want to get in touch with Adela, you can email us at
production@sonargilbert.com, and we'll make sure that gets over to her. If you're just tuning in now, check out the previous part to this podcast and the future ones.
All right. See you next time, everybody.